You're listening to Death of the Reader, Flex and Herds, and Brad Friedman from Our Sweet Mystery here for your Murder Mystery World Tour. We are here in our second week discussing the Millhouse Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji. It is the second book in the Mansion Murder series by the patron saint of the Shinhonkaku movement, and we are talking chapters 6 to 11. Brad and Herds are the ones challenged with solving this book, and before we get into any of the mystery shenanigans today, I want to know what you thought of the silliest scene in this entire book.
Now, I have to ask, are you talking about the scene where we drop an old man out of a wheelchair? Is it?
I am talking about the scene where we drop an old man out of the wheelchair.
It was very silly.
Are you talking about when he trips him?
Yes.
I didn't think it was a silly scene. I thought it had an important moment in it.
Look, I agree with you that there is a clue there is a moment there, and I like that the other characters that aren't Shimada are also picking up on the mystery. I think that's really cool. But also, if you're a detective and you're like, I need to figure out the truth, I need to treat the crime with respect and like figure people out, why is your first instinct to flip someone out of a wheelchair? I just feel like it's very rude.
I thought at first that Shimada had done it on purpose to see, I guess, if he would leap up and go, what did you do that for? I forgot, I can't walk. That wasn't it, I don't think.
It gave Minamura a clue, though, it seems like. So,
oh, yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
I think Shimada got what he wanted out of that personally, but no, I thought that was a very silly scene. I agree, and I'm excited to see what else Shimada does while he's playing the ghost of the house, because that seems to be a thing that he does now. He's like, let me leave spooky letters and make noises in the walls, presumably, and push people out of wheelchairs. That's like his thing.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the best thing here, right? Is that there's this implication that Kojin is still haunting the house. That other man,
the missing man, yes,
talking about.
Yeah, we hear a creaking sound, and it's like, is that a ghost? Is that someone in a mysterious piece of machinery deep inside the house?
I think the other thing that's interesting is we get a lot more about the sort of rest of the cast and what their actual connection to the case is this time.
Yes, we find out why these three, in particular, these four, are invited, the connection they've had to the family. The art critic's father, I think, discovered Issei, kind of. But the one we really see a lot more of is Minamura. He starts to come across as a real creep, a real villain. He's very slimy and sly. He seems to have secret motivations for things. He also has a moment with Yurie where he's sort of seductive that Kichi listens in on. So, I mean, he's playing some kind of game.
Compared to Oishi, who, used to handle Issei's paintings, and Mori, who is the son of the historian you mentioned, Brad, who made him famous. Minamura, his father, was the one who treated Kichi and Masaki after their car crash. He doesn't have like the same vector of connection as the others do. Do you think there's anything going on with that?
I can see his father on his deathbed saying, I have some medical secrets to share with you, my son. He may know some stuff. There's a moment in the past when Masaki says to Minamura, you know why I don't paint anymore. And so the question has been, is this a physical thing or is this an emotional thing? And Minamura isn't a person that Masaki is known to confide in. So I assume it's something medical.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Somebody comments, they're like, you don't seem to have been injured at all. And he says, oh, do I seem like I haven't been? How strange. Like, clearly he's injured in some way that we just can't see, which kind of ties into the theme of bodies being broken. And I think that the eventual fate of Kichi is also going to tie into that idea of like being like just having your body and soul being broken. All of those characters are like scummy. Oishi, I think, is just more open about it. I think it's Mori is speaking with Oishi at one point and is talking about how he's saying on the outside, oh, Oishi, you lovely chap. But then on the inside, he's like, I loathe Oishi. He's the scum of the earth. And oh, I hate that Kojin. He doesn't express his true feelings. What a pathetic man. Like, all of these characters in this house who lust for this painting are like scummy and just awful people.
Well, the one I'm so confused about is Yurie. She's like Samara in The Ring. She's so drippy. She's in this state of perpetual sorrow, like a rag doll. There's something up with this woman. There's a part of it that I think I know, but it doesn't make sense. when you come to the present. So that's where I'm a little confused.
Yeah, there's something kind of like, I think, intentionally gross about the way that Yurie is portrayed, where her agency is taken from her, but we never see it being taken from her. It was like removed in the past.
Right. And what removed it? She wasn't in that car. So what is going on with her? And it has something to do, I mean, with her father and all of this.
I think she just never had the chance to have agency in the first place. I feel like that's the implication.
Yeah, she was like a kid. She was 11 or so. And she lived there for, what, a dozen years? So she's a grown-up now. But, I mean, I have a theory about some of this, which we'll get into. And it seems like she should be not quite so gloomy because of my theory. And that's why I'm a little confused.
As far as I could tell, her like character arc is about moving away from, because like all the characters are talking about how she's sheltered and how she's becoming a beautiful woman and how she's like gaining her agency. And obviously a year ago, she was almost certainly helping Masaki commit his crimes, even if she didn't actually like kill anyone herself. Even if she thought that she'd be happy with Masaki then, she's still kind of living in the same existence that she was a year ago, right? I feel like her arc has to be about like self-determination, right? It has to be about her like figuring out that she can be more than the sad lady who stalks around the house and plays the piano every now and then. I feel like it has to be her like uncovering some level of agency by the end of the book. I don't necessarily think that's going to be like fingering the culprit, but maybe she just goes away to, I don't know, America. Let's say. I don't know.
I suppose the other thing that I wanted to talk about is Shimada this week, because this is kind of the week where we really get into his detective shenanigans. You know, he starts chapter 11 talking about one of the locked rooms by going, oh, well, yeah, this situation sure would be good for HM or Dr. Fell, although Rawson Merlini might be better suited to a disappearance like this. You know, he is the metatextual detective through and through. But it's also interesting because he's like solving a crime that hasn't really happened in his presence. He is just doing it through other people's accounts of the events.
He's being an archaeologist, right?
The thing is that the narrator, Kichi, but not Kichi, is saying, I had already guessed that Shimada was also a great fan of mystery fiction. But some of the others seem puzzled by the unfamiliar names. Mori doesn't know anything about it. Oishi doesn't know anything about it. They only care about their own stuff. Mitamura has a kind of a look. He has a lot of looks in this book. And here's another one of his kind of, Shimada. So Mitamura knows something about this. Evidently, at least two of the three did not belong to their university murder club, but it looks like Masaki did. So he knows about Locked Room Mystery.
I don't know whether Yukito Ayatsuji was still at the Kyoto University Mystery Club when he wrote this book or not, but he was for the Decagon House murders, and he's dotted his characters so thoroughly with knowledge of the genre, and like clearly has particular people who know particular things about the genre, which is really fun in the story. Like one of my favorite scenes is when we walk into the room that's been filled with all of this incense, and you sort of get the vibe that Mitamura is like, I see what's going on here. He's almost thinking like, what is the mystery purpose of all of this incense being in the room, where everyone else is just like, well, it sure is weird there's incense here.
And the incense is very important, I think.
Can we just mention Kojin real quick, because he's not really what I was expecting, and I'm not sure how anyone could convince themselves that he is a murderer, because I mean he has no money.
He's just a sad, decrepit.
He's a pasty ass kid who loves the spirits and just wants to be at home, just wants to stay home and play video games. Let's be real.
He's like a human spindly ghost.
He's the person you spent Friday night with. Come on, admit it.
Listen, don't call us out like that, Brad.
I was gonna say I spent my Friday nights with Flex, so I don't know what you're on about.
Well, there you go. There you go. If I was going to pick any character that I felt each of you was like, Flex, you're Kojin.
That's terrible.
Does that mean who's Herds then?
Oh, come on. I'm Oishi. Let's go. I'm the gross guy. It's like, here's where I get all the money and all the paintings. Money is no object. I've got like rings on my fingers. Look, let's go.
I would like to say I'm Shimada, but I think I'm Fumie, Fumi, however you say her name, the one who went flying out the window.
You're already dead. That's terrible.
I hope you boys are dressed up before you go out tonight.
God.
So
That's horrendous. Anyway.
All right. You're listening to Death of the Reader. We are discussing the Millhouse Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji, chapters 6 to 11. We'll be back to talk about the mystery at the end of the show, so stick around for that. You're on to SER 107.3. You're listening to Death of the Reader. Flex and Herds here for your Murder Mystery World Tour. It's been a good few years since we covered Robert Gott's Good Murder on the show, and he's put out 2 entire series since that book's publication. With his latest political satire, The Who Did What? Naked Ambition, recently out. I'm delighted to say, Robert, welcome back to Death of the Reader.
It's been too long.
I remember quite fondly and often regale at book festivals opening my first interview with you with Robert. I do not like your book. Convince me why I should. And it was such good sport, and I have gone on to be such a fan that it is a disgrace that this is the first time we're getting to your work again.
I was just supremely indifferent how you responded to it.
Well, at least now we can count Flex among the fans.
Yes, I'm grateful.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially as that was my very first novel. So there were things in it that were sloppy and very first novelish.
There was room for improvement. Speaking
Sure
of
was.
sloppy,
Oh.
Robert, at the center of your book is a nude portrait of our so-called protagonist, Gregory Buchanan, and it famously overwhelms its audience with the sight of his knob. What inspired you to balance the entire intricacy of the plot on the end of Greg's member?
Great question. I have asked this question before, but am I the only person who, when he looks at a politician, imagines that person nude? Am I the only person?
I can't imagine you're the only one, but
I haven't done
only
it,
one in
but-
the room, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Maybe I'm the only one who says it out loud.
And that's really brave of you.
Thank you. I just thought it was a comic idea that you'd have someone who was so vain that he'd think that being painted nude, full frontal, photorealist, larger than life, was a good idea. I think it speaks to the vanity and stupidity of most politicians, who are essentially solipsistic, aren't they? You wouldn't be a politician unless your ego was the size of a rainforest.
Well, part of the analysis of the portrait that I really enjoyed is that, of course, Gregory, he thinks that it is a beautiful portrait of himself.
Yeah. But
the other characters, they keep saying, it makes you seem a little bit awful, doesn't it? You seem a bit cruel, a bit ambitious. And he says, no. That's just my regal posing and my cunning gaze. And
Yes, I look so assertive.
yeah,
Yes, that's right.
assertive. And there's a fine line between assertive and aggressive.
indeed. I think one of the characters says assertiveness is just aggression with its hair combed and its tie straightened.
Although he's not wearing a tie.
No, he's not. He is very much not wearing a tie.
He's not even that far.
The trouble with the portrait is that the way it's painted, the cock is absolutely at eye height. So it takes a while for anyone looking at it to get to the face because you get snagged halfway up. But once you get to the face, then you realize, or at least his wife suddenly realizes, that the artist has seen something in his face that she's never seen before, but perhaps suspected, which is that he has a side to him that's venal and proud and ambitious and narcissistic.
There was something very funny to me about the idea that Phoebe, Gregory's wife, is a PR manager and the just fictionally perfect pairing of a politician and PR person in marriage.
Yes, indeed. But he the only time he's ever drawn on her expertise is when he grew a moustache. And she said, no, absolutely not.
I guess going into the politics side of things, this is in some ways a pretty big departure from the William Power Fiasco series and the Holiday Murder series, which Riley dealt with gender politics and leadership, but in a very different manner to the way that you deal with them in just this much more open satire that's much more engaged with the politics. It's like the two key tenets of the other series smushed together in a way that doesn't seem like it would quite work. How did it feel putting those together after keeping those concepts so separate for so long?
Look, it felt marvelous because although there are pleasures to be had in finding ways to kill people, there's just enormous pleasure to also be had to sit down and just write an out-and-out, what is essentially an old-fashioned drawing room comedy. It reads like a play. It could be a play. It's set basically in one room. It's opened out a little bit, but not very much. So I just wanted to create a book that was very much dialogue driven and keep the characters all together in one place. And then to draw on the crime part of my work, I had a crime committed inside the room. So it becomes a kind of a locked room mystery where the crime that's committed could have been committed by any one of the characters in the book.
I do quite like the insinuation that with the living room murder structure, that because we are in this environment where most of the novel takes place in one setting, that the crime also cannot take place outside that setting. Like,
that's right.
It's true.
You know, we're bounded by a fictional constraint that the book doesn't ever deal with explicitly, but is obvious in a way that makes it that much funnier.
Yes, exactly. It was a great fun to do, and I shamefully just made myself laugh.
Oh no!
How dare you laugh at your own joke?
I know you should never admit to that.
No, well, it is a very funny book.
No, thank you. It was just a great pleasure to sit down and write it.
Well, you mentioned that you wrote it as a play almost, and we were just going to say there's quite a few details beyond the fact that it could be put on as a stage play. I almost wonder if that was your intent to begin with.
It was.
Like, there you go. Because there's the limited cast, the limited locations. There's even a moment where one of the characters comments that when they leave the living room to go to a different room and they come back and all the characters are still in the same place. They don't seem to have moved at all. It's almost as though they froze in time while he was missing. It's very bizarre in a way that, lends to the absurdity. I guess what led you to kind of writing this like a stage production? Why that inspiration?
Well, because originally, years and years and years ago, in a very inchoate way, it began as a play. Then I thought, well, I can actually expand this without opening it out. One of the things I do find annoying in the cinema, for example, is when I've been to see a play that I love, then you go and see the film version of the play, and they f it up because they feel like they've got to open it out. You've got to put people outside, put them in streets, take them out of the play and find new places to put them, as if the audience is incapable of being engaged if they're just in one place.
It's always more interesting doing it with a book too, because you don't have to deal with the filmmaking budgetary constraint.
That's right. Yeah.
Is there a plan to have this on a stage that we should be keeping an eye out for, Robert?
Wouldn't that be great? I await a theatre company to read the book and say, write us the script.
Well,
and the thing about the play,
the challenge is open.
It's very important that portrait, when it's on stage, is never seen by the audience.
Well, can I tell you, I'm sorry to just completely derail us, but I was thinking about that because I love the idea that it's never seen. I was thinking that when you had it on screen, either it's like facing away from the audience, it's like, facing the wall, or it's facing the audience, but you hang like a sock or something in the center of the painting to keep it decent. And so whatever the characters are like, it's quite imposing, isn't it? They can like lift up the sock and look underneath. I would really enjoy that.
It is really quite spectacular the way that you've dealt with space, in that every character arrives on the scene and has to be wheeled around to have the portrait presented to them.
Yeah, because even in the book, it's kind of off stage. And I think if it were ever on stage, it would be much better if the audience built their own vision of what that portrait was, rather than have it staring them in the face. But so I think there are 3 lessons to take away from this book, and one of them is if you're ever having a nude portrait done, and there's nothing wrong with having a nude portrait done, don't ever have your face and your genitals in the same portrait. No one's going to look at your face. And the second one, I think it's Margaret in the book who says there are no votes in the scrotum, and no one's going to vote for a politician whose genitals they can Google. And I think that's a great truth.
Makes sense to me.
Would you?
I mean,
it remains to be seen if Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson gets elected. That's all I'm saying. Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining us here on Death of the Reader. It's been a treat reading through Naked Ambition and just a joy returning to your work.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been a treat at this end too. It's been far too long.
I agree. Thank you to Scribe Publishing for sending us a copy of Naked Ambition. We will have links up on the podcast to the book if you want to find out more about it. This is your Murder Mystery World Tour here on 2SCR 107.3, and we'll be back with more in just a second. You're listening to Death of the Reader, Flex and Herds, here for your Murder Mystery World Tour, and we are joined still by Brad Friedman from Our Sweet Mystery, one of the internet's finest blogs on mystery fiction, and he's chuckling away in the background as I say this. But Brad, I mean, come on. I go to every blog in the Murder Mystery blogosphere, and there's yours right at the top. I'm sure it has nothing to do with the alphabet.
Right. It's going to be Sweet Mystery with just AAA, but I felt that was unfair, so I just did
We are talking The Millhouse Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji, chapters 6 to 11, and just before we left off, Brad, you had mentioned that you thought the scene where we walked into an incense-filled bathroom was an important clue, and I'm curious what you think that clue is.
Well, why do you light incense? I suppose he could have lit a little incense for a religious experience, but this was a lot of incense.
A lot of incense,
This was like they were wiping the smoke from in front of them. There was that much incense. So you do that to cover up a smell.
Oh, you see, I had a different inclination. I was thinking that here it was making it obvious that Kojin was searching for a hidden passage and trying to use smoke to find the entrance, but he couldn't, so it had stuffed up the room.
That's too big brain for me. Good grief.
Yeah, I would have never. What an interesting theory. I just thought they're trying to cover it up. Because here's the thing. There were two people missing, Masaki and Kojin, right? Only I think Herds and I flopped on it like on page cast of characters, or maybe the cover that Kichi is Masaki, all right? So that means like Kichi's missing, right? So we've got two guys missing. And when we started reading, I'm like, well, Masaki killed Kichi, cut him up, and put him in the incinerator at the end. So I don't know. That may still be so, but we do have this big chunk of time between the last time we saw Kojin and the time they realize he's missing. And there's all this smoke in the room covering up a smell. So I'm going to say that it was Kojin who was killed and not Kichi. They say that Kojin went upstairs and then he never came back down, but he's not up there anymore. And then after about 3 pages of that, they say, well, maybe Mitamura and Mori, maybe we were playing chess so deeply that we didn't notice him. And if that's true, then why is Pushkin Vertigo publishing this locked room mystery without a locked room? That's too easy. That can't be true. He had to go upstairs and then disappear. And how could he do that?
It's via the secret passage he didn't find, obviously.
Secret passage he didn't find. But see, if there was a secret passage up there, then the smoke would have gone through the wall, right?
Exactly. So there cannot be a secret passage.
And they said the windows open, they're so small that you can't fit a full human body through those windows.
Interesting that you say a full human body there, Brad.
Why would they cut up the body into 6 pieces? I mean, out of vengeance, out of anger, to get it to cook faster, possibly, but also maybe to get it out the window. Because the last thing we read before the end is Masaki saying, oh, I think I see Kojin running outside. I'm going to go outside and find him. Of course he's going to find him. He's going to pick him up in little pieces, and he's going to take him down to the incinerator and burn him up. And that's what I think he did, because who's upstairs with Kojin? The only person upstairs with Kojin is Masaki. They're side by side in rooms. So Masaki's up there. And what's he doing? He's cutting up this guy, and he's pushing him through the window. And then it probably smells bad, all that coppery blood. And so he's got to light like 400 sticks of incense to cover up the smell of blood.
I noticed as I was looking through the book that the concept of smell is brought up very rarely. It is brought up for the incense, and it is brought up for the incinerator and when they're finding the body. So clearly the idea of something smelly being associated with death is like a strong thing in the book. The other detail I want to highlight is that when we ask Kiichi in the present, what's out that window, he says, oh, just a bunch of shrubs. So he literally cut up the man's body and chucked him in the bushes. Literally hit him in the bushes.
Well, but I mean, surely Mitamura, Mori, and Genzo would have heard a full human torso falling from a story
It was storming. You shut your mouth.
It's storming, and the two guys are playing chess.
Yeah, they're thinking deeply.
Chess, famously one of the loudest games in the
clack
world.
of pieces.
Yes, it is, you know?
Look, it was storming at the time. And also, Mori, I'm going to count this as a clue. Mori pings on it in the present and says, oh, about that theory that you had, when Shimada's like checking out the window. But the power goes out before Mori can finish their thought.
Yeah, he's like looking out the gray curtains.
Isn't Mori wearing hearing aids?
Yes, attached to their glasses.
I believe so.
Yeah, he's wearing hearing aids. He can't hear. And if Mitamura hears, he's probably going, this is how I can get the final painting. I know all of this. I will have Yurie in my bed, and I will have the painting in my arms. I will have Yurie in my arms and the painting in my bed. But
It's
you know, I know
the painting
so much.
in the bed. I think that's correct.
So maybe he heard it. He might have heard it.
No, I agree with that.
So you've said that Hojin is the one that has been murdered now, which means that we have an inexplicable lack of Kichi.
We have a lack of Kichi.
We have another locked room to contend with.
Another locked room? What
We
other
do.
locked room?
Shut your mouth. It's the study. So here's the thing. We talked about last week, again, that there was a smell in the basement. I want to say in the turbine room that the housekeeper keeps smelling. And I know, Brad, that you think this is impossible and you're going to hate this, but I reckon that smell, again, is the smell of death. This is in the present. And it is the smell of Kiichi rotting probably in the walls of the turbine room or like under the floors or something. And the clue here, the smoking gun here is the red brick fireplace purely because it is the only feature of the study that is of any note. I think that there's like a tunnel or an elevator or something. Brad, you were talking about machinery earlier. Maybe there's like a machine in the fireplace that like carries you down, something like that.
Oh my God. That's just like, take the body.
That sounds right to me. And I think that Kiichi's like plan in the past was when he realized that everyone was there to steal his painting. He was like, I'll just go down into the secret passage and like hide out there for a while. And then, I don't know, maybe he ended up there without his wheelchair or maybe he fell out of it and he just got stuck down there on his own because he couldn't trust anybody else to look after him and his precious painting. Because why can we not show anyone the painting?
You don't think it shows anything incriminating?
That's a good question, actually. I'm not sure what's on the painting. Clearly, it is something that Kiichi would die for. But it was painted before his accident, right? So it can't be like, maybe it is just his old face.
I guess the other thing I wanted to ask about, though, before I grill you on your last points-worthiness things, is the letter. You guys said it was Shimada who'd left the letter.
It's got to be Shimada, right? Brad, do you think it's one of the other guests? Do you think it's...
I don't think it's Shimada. It doesn't make any sense for it to be Shimada. Why would he want him to leave the house?
Just to like spook out the culprit, but maybe you were thinking it might have been Mitamura, right? That seemed to be what you were leaning on earlier.
Well, I was thinking if it was one of the guests, because I figured if he left, they could search for the painting.
Well, the other thing is that Shimada seems surprised when there's mention that Kiichi in the present day didn't see the letter.
I don't know. Is it his eyesight? Is that... Is it his eyesight? Is that where we're going with this? No. What do you think, Brad?
His eyesight.
Sees a letter as a stain on the carpet. Then it's like a color. It's a color thing then, right?
Yeah, it's a stain on the red carpet.
Oh my God. The green carpet.
Yes.
The red, shoot.
It's got
1934 colorblind. Shoot. He's colorblind. Oh, and you know what? They talk about the difference in his painting style from his master. He paints all these kind of naturalistic stuff, and he paints colors.
I just want to say, I think you've both done a wonderful job with this very challenging mystery novel. And next week on the show, we will be back.
The man is making fun of us.
All the way to the end of The Millhouse Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji, the second novel in the Mansion Murder series.
But the first in our hearts.
I just want to let you know that Professor Satomi Saito, who we spoke to about the Decagon murders last time we covered Yukito Ayatsuji on the show, said that the following novel in the Mansion Murder series, The Labyrinth Murders, is the hardest one in the series. So take that as you will. This is your Murder Mystery World Tour here on 2SER 107.3. We'll be back with more Yukito Ayatsuji next week on the show. Stick around. Sounds and ideas for Sydney on 2SER 107.3.
Final thought, it's a painting of the Labyrinth murders. Done. Seal it away.